The sky above the planet Kurilosh was a calm shade of violet. Thin clouds drifted slowly across the horizon, carrying with them the gentle glow of two suns. To the Kuriloshi people, this world was their jewel, a safe home where science, trade, and diplomacy had thrived for centuries. Their cities shimmered like crystal towers, built not for war but for peace. But peace was fragile. In the command chamber of Outpost 17, alarms wailed. Rows of Kuriloshi officers moved quickly across the polished floor, their slender arms tapping at holographic displays. Their soft voices, usually calm and measured, were sharp with fear. "Enemy ships at the edge of the system," reported Officer Vale, his frills trembling. "They number at least 40 vessels. Heavy cruisers, some carriers." Commander Reelan, the outpost leader, felt a deep weight settle on his chest. His species had always trusted the Galactic Council to provide defense. The Kurilosh were diplomats, artists, and scientists, not soldiers. Against a force this large, they had no chance. He drew in a slow breath, trying to steady himself. "Open the distress channel. All frequencies. Send word to the Council fleet." At once, technicians scrambled to obey. A beacon of energy pulsed out into the void, carrying a desperate plea for help. The message was clear: "We are under attack. Please, anyone who hears this, come to our aid." The outpost chamber fell quiet except for the hum of machinery. Every officer present knew the truth. They were too far from the Council's core fleets. Help might come in days. By then, Kurilosh would already be ash and smoke. Still, there was no other choice. The enemy approaches from the viewing window. Reelan could already see them. Dozens of dark ships drifted closer, their hulls scarred and jagged, painted with the symbols of the Vorok Empire. The Vorok were not conquerors for resources or survival. They conquered for dominance, for the cruel joy of crushing weaker civilizations. The commander's frills folded tight against his neck in fear. The Vorok had already reduced 2 neighboring systems to rubble. Now it was Kurilosh's turn. "Shields to maximum," he ordered, though he knew it would make little difference. "Prepare all orbital defenses." His officers obeyed, but the hopelessness in their eyes betrayed them. Their defense grid was designed to ward off pirates, not an armada. Still, the Kuriloshi were proud, and they would not surrender without trying. A signal lost far beyond their star system, the SOS raced across the void. Normally, the encryption key in the signal would guide it directly to the Council's nearest military outpost. But as the energy pulse traveled, the code faltered. Corruption crept into the data, scattering the coordinates. Instead of reaching the Council fleet, the signal veered off course. It brushed against dormant relay satellites, some ancient and long abandoned. It leapt across forgotten jump gates and faded trade routes, and finally it found itself captured by an unexpected receiver. A Terran deep space listening post. The Terran relay on the far edge of known space. A lone human technician sat in a cramped monitoring station, sipping lukewarm coffee. His name was Ethan Marlowe, and his job was usually boring, just listening for stray signals from the void. When the alien distress beacon slammed into his console, the lights on his board flared red. Ethan choked on his drink, wiping his chin as he leaned forward. "What in the—" His eyes widened as lines of alien script scrolled across his screen. His translator AI stuttered, then steadied. "Distress signal, attack imminent, coordinates attached, please respond." Ethan blinked. This is real. Someone's in trouble." His hands moved quickly, patching the message through to command. Within minutes, the call had leapt across the Terran. The distress signal from the planet Kurilosh had traveled far across the stars. It was meant for the Galactic Council fleet, but instead it was received by the Terran relay stations on the edge of explored space. When the humans picked up the call, they did not hesitate. To them, a cry for help was not something to ignore. Within hours, space around Kurilosh began to shift. Strange ripples spread across the system as human warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel. The Kuriloshi had expected elegant cruisers from the Council, sleek, silver, and filled with diplomats. What they saw instead left them silent with shock. The ships were nothing like Council designs. They were dark, angular, and carried heavy plating scarred with old battle marks. Weapons jutted out at strange angles like teeth ready to bite. Even their engines roared with an unsettling hum, as if the very metal of their hulls vibrated with restrained fury. To the Kurilosh, who valued balance and beauty in their designs, the Terran fleet looked almost primitive. But there was something else beneath that surface, a weight, a feeling of strength that made the Kurilosh shiver in both fear and relief. Whispers spread across the planet's defense channels. Deathworlders, someone gasped. They came. The Kuriloshi had studied the humans only in stories, in old records shared in council libraries. The Terrans were from a world so dangerous that even their plants and weather were considered hostile. Every cycle of life on Earth had been a struggle. Many alien scholars believed such creatures could never rise beyond survival. Yet somehow they had reached the stars, and now, here they were, answering an SOS not meant for them. The enemy fleet, which had been circling the planet like predators around wounded prey, paused when the Terran ships appeared. Their commanders laughed on open comms, their voices filled with arrogance. Primitive vessels, one enemy captain sneered. They think to interfere in matters of empires? They will be swept aside like dust. From orbit, the Kurilosh could hear the taunts. Their hearts sank. Even if the humans were brave, what chance did they have against such a large and organized force? Yet the humans did not respond with insults. Their channels stayed silent except for calm, precise commands passing between ships. Their fleet arranged itself quickly without delay, as though this exact situation had been practiced many times before. A voice finally came through, a Terran officer, his tone even and steady. "This is the Terran Defense Fleet. You sent a call for aid. We are here." Simple words, yet they carried a weight that silenced even the doubtful Kuriloshi generals. The enemy made the first move. Bright streaks of energy cut across the void, hammering toward the Terran ships. The blast lit up the darkness, shaking the Kurilosh orbital sensors with raw power. It was an opening strike meant to terrify, but the humans did not panic. Their ships shifted formation with almost reckless confidence. Instead of pulling back or raising traditional shield walls, the Terrans spread apart. They created gaps weaving between incoming fire, their engines glowing as they darted like hunters through a storm. The Kurilosh commanders watched in disbelief. This is not council training," one whispered. "No," another replied, voice heavy. "This is something else entirely." The first Terran counterattack came suddenly. Small objects detached from the warships and scattered across the void. At first, the Kuriloshi thought they were escape pods. Then the objects flared to life. Drones, hundreds of them, moving in coordinated swarms. The drones struck with speed and precision, targeting weak points in the enemy hulls. Explosions rippled across two enemy ships before the attackers even realized what had happened. More surprises followed. A Terran cruiser angled itself toward a passing asteroid, fired a heavy blast into its surface, and sent the rock spinning into the path of enemy vessels. It was not elegant, not refined, but it was devastatingly effective. The asteroid smashed through shields, tearing across metal as sparks burst into the void. The Kurilosh could only stare. They are using the system itself as a weapon. Inside the human fleet, discipline held strong. Their captains issued short commands: adjust vectors, launch counterfire, rotate formations. Every order was followed without hesitation. They moved like parts of a single body, each ship protecting the other while searching for chances to strike. The enemy commanders, on the other hand, grew frustrated. Their ships had been designed for intimidation, not flexibility. They expected opponents to surrender or flee after the first barrage. But these humans did neither. Instead, they adapted. Every failed strike taught them more about the enemy's weapons, shields, and patterns. Every moment they survived made them stronger. Soon the invaders lost 3 ships torn apart by relentless swarms and clever tricks. Panic spread across their comms. Their tone shifted from arrogance to disbelief. How? How do they keep finding our weaknesses? One shouted. "They are not fighting like any navy we know," cried another. From the surface of Kurilosh, people watched in awe. They had never seen battle like this. To them, warfare was usually precise, controlled, and balanced. But the humans fought as if every strike carried the weight of survival itself. They twisted every disadvantage into a weapon. It was then that the Kurilosh understood why the humans were called Deathworlders. It was not just their home world that was harsh, it was their very way of living. They had learned to fight in chaos, to thrive in danger, to adapt faster than any other species. The thought sent chills through the Kuriloshi leaders. For the first time, they began to wonder if the stories were true, that humanity was not just another species in the galaxy, but something different, something that could not be measured by ordinary standards. The enemy fleet pulled back into a defensive line. Smoke and fire trailed from their damaged vessels. For the first time they seemed uncertain, and still the Terrans pressed forward. They did not rush but advanced with steady force, their ship's dark shadows cutting through the void. Every move was deliberate, every strike chosen with care. The comms lit up again, and this time the words were directed at both enemy and ally alike. A Terran captain's voice rang clear, calm, and unshaken. "You called," we answered. "Nobody bullies our neighbors." The words struck the Kralosh deeper than any weapon. By the end of the clash, the system had changed forever. The Kralosh no longer saw themselves as helpless victims. They now stood under the protection of something far more terrifying and far more dependable than the Council fleets. For the first time in centuries, the enemy invaders hesitated, and for the first time in history, the Kralosh whispered not of their Council allies, but of the Deathworlders who had come from across the stars to answer a broken SOS. The battle was not finished yet. But one thing had become certain: the galaxy would remember the day humans arrived. The void between the stars seemed to hold its breath. On one side of the planet Kralosh, the invader fleet gathered in a thick line of steel and light. On the other side, the Terran ships spread out like hunters circling prey. Between them lay the fragile hope of the Kraloshi, who watched from their orbiting defense stations and surface bunkers. The invaders had not expected resistance. For cycles, they had conquered weaker colonies and demanded tribute from those too afraid to resist. Their fleets were built for fear, not for patience. Now, faced with the dark, scarred ships of humanity, their commanders felt an edge of unease. Still, arrogance was stronger than caution. Their leader spoke across the comms, his voice sharp and cold. "Deathworlders," he sneered, "you interfere in matters beyond your strength. Leave now, or be erased." No reply came from the humans. Their silence was heavy, almost insulting. Instead, their ships continued adjusting formation. The Terran fleet spread wider, their lines shifting in quiet coordination, as if preparing a trap. The first strike came without warning. A column of bright energy shot across the darkness, fired from the invaders' flagship. It was a blast strong enough to break through Council cruisers, strong enough to shatter orbital platforms. It streaked toward a Terran battleship, but the humans did not flinch. At the last moment, the targeted vessel twisted aside, its engines burning at full force. The beam grazed its armor, leaving molten scars but failing to pierce through. Instead of retreating, the battleship accelerated, charging straight into the chaos. Then the humans answered. Dozens of smaller weapons opened fire, their blasts scattered but purposeful. They aimed not at the enemy's shields directly but at the areas around them, testing, probing, measuring the strength of the defense grid. Within moments, patterns began to appear on Terran displays. Weak spots, delay times, vulnerable sections where the enemy had not expected resistance. The Kraloshi observers gasped. The Terrans were not firing wildly. They were studying the battle as if it were a puzzle to be solved. The second wave came faster. This time, the Terrans struck with precision. Their swarms of drones darted forward, moving like a living cloud. The invaders unleashed volleys of fire to cut them down, but for every drone destroyed, 3 more slipped through. They swirled around engines, crawled across weapon mounts, and detonated at critical points. One enemy destroyer burst apart, its hull cracking in a spray of debris. Another spun helplessly, engines crippled by drone fire. The formation of the invader fleet began to fracture. From the surface, the Kraloshi watched with wide eyes. The Council fleets they had once relied on never fought this way. Council doctrine demanded clean lines, careful strikes, minimal risks. The humans ignored such ideas. They embraced chaos, turning every opening into an advantage. "This is unnatural," whispered one Kraloshi officer. "They move like predators, not soldiers." His superior, older and wiser, answered softly, "No, they move like survivors." The enemy, shaken but still strong, launched their counterattack. Hundreds of missiles streaked toward the Terran fleet, filling the void with trails of fire. Any other navy would have raised massive shield walls to block them. The humans did not. Instead, their ships scattered again, weaving apart. Missiles split their pursuit, following targets that twisted and dodged with reckless speed. Then, in a move that left even the Kurilosh stunned, one Terran frigate deliberately flew straight into the path of the missiles. Its crew overloaded the ship's engines, ejecting massive clouds of heat and debris. The missiles, confused by the sudden storm of signals, detonated too early, far from their intended targets. The frigate limped, its hull scorched, but it survived, and the rest of the fleet, untouched, pressed the attack. The invaders realized too late. Humans were willing to risk damage if it meant saving others. No ship was left behind, and no sacrifice was wasted. The clash grew fiercer. One Terran cruiser swung dangerously close to a drifting asteroid. Instead of avoiding it, the ship fired a precise blast at the rock, sending it spinning into the path of 3 enemy vessels. The asteroid shattered against their shields, but the impact drained power. Within seconds, human weapons tore through the weakened defenses. The enemy flagship tried to rally its fleet, ordering them back into tight formation. But every attempt was broken apart by the Terrans' relentless pressure. Their tactics were unpredictable, changing with every moment. To the invaders, it felt less like a naval battle and more like a storm that studied, learned, and struck with growing precision. For the Kurilosh, it was a revelation. On their viewing screens, they saw not just power, but determination. They saw ships that should have fallen holding their ground. They saw drones swarming like living creatures, guided by minds that adapted faster than machines. And they saw something else. The Terrans fought not just to win, but to protect. Every maneuver, every sacrifice was designed to shield their allies and crush the enemy's will. The Kuriloshi leader whispered what many were already thinking. The Deathworlders are not here for conquest. They are here because we called. By the end of the clash, the results were undeniable. 3 enemy battleships were gone, their wreckage drifting in silence. Several others were crippled, their systems flickering as they tried to regroup. The invader fleet, once so confident, now hesitated at every command. Meanwhile, the Terran fleet stood strong. Some ships carried scars, their armor blackened and torn, but none had fallen. They reformed their lines, ready to press forward again. For the first time in the memory of many Kuriloshi, their enemies retreated a short distance. Not far, not surrendering, but retreating nonetheless. On the surface of Kurilosh, a quiet cheer rose from the bunkers. The people dared to hope. The enemy fleet had come expecting easy victory. Instead, they had been shaken by those who came from a world of storms, quakes, and endless struggle. The galaxy had given them a name long ago, Deathworlders. And now, for the first time, the Kurilosh truly understood what it meant. It meant that even in the face of overwhelming odds, the humans did not break. They adapted, they endured, and they fought back with a ferocity no empire could easily contain. The battle was not over, but the first clash had changed everything. The invaders now knew fear, the Kuriloshi now knew hope, and the humans, calm and steady, prepared for the next strike. The battle over Kurilosh raged, but a new rhythm had emerged. The enemy fleet, once confident and organized, now moved cautiously. Every attack was calculated, every maneuver hesitant. Their arrogance had been shattered by the first clash, and the humans pressed forward with steady precision. From orbit, the Kuriloshi watched the Terran ships with growing awe. These were not just warships. They were a force of adaptability, creativity, and unyielding resolve. Every move the humans made seemed to anticipate the enemy's next step. On the bridge of the Terran flagship, Captain Celine adjusted her controls, her dark eyes scanning the display. Sensor reports show the enemy shields weakening. Drone swarms are already exploiting gaps in the formation, she said calmly. Lieutenant Marique, her tactical officer, nodded. They're trying to regroup. If we push now, we can force them to split further. Celine's lips curved slightly. Then we push. But carefully. No ship gets left behind. The Terran fleet advanced with deliberate patience. Rather than attacking in a full strike, they used feints and controlled maneuvers to create confusion. One cruiser detached from the main line, drawing 2 enemy destroyers toward it. As expected, the humans had set a trap. Hidden in the shadows of nearby asteroids, drone swarms moved unseen. They struck the enemy's exposed flanks, crippling weapons and engines before the ships realized they were under attack. The Kuroloshi observers gasped. "They are teaching the enemy a lesson without even firing directly," one exclaimed. Another officer nodded. "It's strategy. And patience. They think in layers we have never seen before." On the enemy flagship, panic had begun to spread. The commanding officer barked orders, but the chaos in their fleet made coordination nearly impossible. "Focus fire on the Terrans," he shouted. "We will not let them split us." But the humans anticipated this. Terran ships moved unpredictably, darting in and out of fire lines. When the enemy concentrated on one target, another Terran cruiser exploited the opening elsewhere. The battle became a complex dance of attack and evasion, each side learning from the other, but humans adapting faster. On one wing, Captain Celine's cruiser engaged in a risky maneuver. She navigated between two massive enemy vessels, dodging heavy fire while positioning her drones for maximum effect. With a single command, the drones swarmed both ships, striking at engines and weapon arrays simultaneously. Two enemy vessels faltered, then veered off course. The remaining ships hesitated, unsure how to respond to the relentless adaptive attacks. Meanwhile, Kurolosh's planetary defense stations began relaying real-time observations to their government and military leaders. They could not believe what they saw. Their SOS had been sent almost by accident, yet the response was unlike anything they had ever imagined. "They fight not for glory, not for conquest, but for purpose," one Kuroloshi general whispered. "Purpose and protection," replied another. "They fight for us, not for themselves." The Kuroloshi people began to understand the meaning of humanity's reputation across the galaxy. The Deathworlders were not conquerors, they were survivors, protectors, and strategists beyond measure. The enemy fleet tried to regroup and form a defensive perimeter, but the Terrans were already several steps ahead. Captain Celine gave another command: "Deploy the secondary drone wave. Use the asteroids for cover and pressure the flanks." The drones, hundreds strong, moved like a single organism. They exploited weak spots, disabled engines, and jammed communications. Enemy ships found themselves caught in a net of strategy and adaptability, unable to escape the growing pressure. The Kuroloshi could see the enemy's confidence eroding. Commands became sharper, more desperate, as though every officer feared the humans' next move before they even made it. Even the invaders' weapon systems seemed less effective. The humans were exploiting terrain, speed, and clever distractions rather than relying solely on firepower. Every attack became a calculated step toward controlling the battlefield, not just destroying targets. Amid the chaos, the Kuroloshi also observed the human mindset in action. There were moments of risk, but never recklessness. Captain Celine ordered her ship into a narrow asteroid field, where enemy fire would be less effective. Every move was measured, designed to minimize casualties while maximizing pressure. When one Terran vessel was lightly damaged, repair drones and human crews worked instantly to restore it. The Kuroloshi watched in surprise. Even amid a brutal engagement, the humans ensured none of their allies were left vulnerable. "This is remarkable," said one Kuroloshi diplomat. "Even under fire, they maintain order, coordination, and care." Her colleague nodded slowly. "They fight for victory, yes, but also for survival, and for the survival of those they protect." The tide of battle began to turn unmistakably. The enemy fleet, exhausted and confused, struggled to maintain formation. Several ships had lost engines or weapons arrays, while others were forced to cover for damaged comrades. Seeing the moment, Captain Celine made the decision to strike directly at the enemy flagship. "It's time to end this engagement," she told her officers. "Focus fire, but precision over destruction." The Terran fleet moved as one, using all the knowledge gathered during the clash. Targeting weak points, avoiding traps, and striking in coordinated waves, they forced the enemy flagship into a defensive stance. For the first time, the enemy realized they were facing more than just a fleet. They were facing a human strategy they could not predict. From the Kuroloshi surface, people began to cheer quietly. Communications across the planet reported success after success. A defensive planet had become a symbol of hope, not because of their own strength, but because of the humans who had come to answer their call. "The Deathworlders are extraordinary," whispered one child to her sibling. "They protect even strangers, Across the orbiting stations, elders nodded silently. They had seen fleets of the Galactic Council, studied military histories, but nothing like this. Humanity's approach combined courage, intelligence, and care, a combination alien civilizations rarely understood. The enemy flagship, finally cornered, raised its shields to maximum power. But the Terran fleet did not retreat. Instead, Captain Celine's orders were calm, precise. Now, strike at the shield generators, then hold position for boarding drones if necessary. Drones detached from multiple ships and moved toward the enemy vessel. Missiles targeted the generators while energy pulses jammed their systems. In minutes, critical shields failed, leaving the enemy flagship vulnerable. The invader commander, realizing his doom, attempted one last desperate maneuver to flee. But the humans anticipated it. Their ships blocked the escape path while drones and precision strikes disabled engines. The flagship had no choice but to surrender. Silence fell over the battlefield. The remaining enemy ships, seeing their leader cornered, hesitated. Some attempted retreat, others broke apart under continued pressure. For the first time, humans had demonstrated not just combat ability, but a mastery of strategy and psychological pressure. Captain Celine contacted the Kraloshi command station. Her voice was steady and calm. The flagship has surrendered. Remaining forces will retreat if they value their lives. Consider this a warning. Interfere with your neighbors again and the consequences will be severe. The Kraloshi leaders felt a wave of relief and awe. Their accidental call for help had brought more than defense. It had brought a lesson for the galaxy. As the enemy fleet withdrew, the Kraloshi began to understand the meaning of the phrase they had whispered before, Deathworlders. Humans were not just survivors, they were teachers of courage, strategy, and protection. Their presence had turned the tide of battle and ensured that Kralosh would remain free from invader control. From the orbiting stations and planetary surface, one thought echoed across the people of Kralosh. Humanity was unlike any other race, and now they had witnessed it firsthand. The first clash had ended, but its effects would last for generations. The invaders had learned fear. The Kraloshi had learned hope. And the humans, calm, calculating, and relentless, had cemented their reputation as a force the galaxy could not ignore. The turning tide was complete. Victory was near, and the galaxy would never forget the day the Deathworlders answered a call for help. The vast emptiness of space over Kralosh had grown quiet. The invading fleet, once arrogant and confident, had withdrawn. Sparks of damaged ships drifted slowly in the void, a reminder of the battle that had reshaped the system. On the surface, the people of Kralosh began to emerge from shelters, their eyes wide with relief and awe. From orbit, the Terran fleet remained vigilant, scanning the retreating enemy and ensuring no hidden threats remained. Captain Celine observed the calm, her dark eyes reflecting the stars. Her crew worked quietly, repairing minor damage and maintaining watch. Every officer knew that while the battle was over, their responsibility was not. Lieutenant Merrick approached her bridge console. Captain, all remaining threats have been neutralized or are retreating. Kralosh appears secure. Celine nodded. Good. Begin orbit stabilization. We'll maintain position until we ensure the planet and its people are fully protected. On Kralosh, the leaders had gathered in their main command hall. For hours, they had observed the human fleet's actions, unable to fully grasp the depth of what they had witnessed. They had expected soldiers, perhaps even diplomats, but not this. The humans. They fought differently, said General Kirill, his voice low, almost reverent. They did not fight for glory or conquest. They fought to protect, and they adapted faster than anything we have ever seen. The planetary governor nodded. It is true. They answered our call even though we never expected them to. And they have taught our people what true courage and strategy mean. A young officer, barely out of training, spoke hesitantly. Sir, they are called Deathworlders, yes? I now understand why. Kirill smiled faintly. Yes, they survive in worlds that would destroy other species. And now Kralosh has seen the power of that survival firsthand. Captain Celine had requested a meeting with Kralosh officials. In the planet's primary council chamber, she stepped down from her ship's small landing pod, her posture calm and assured. The Kraloshi gathered around, some still wary, others openly curious. You saved our world, Governor Lyra said, bowing slightly. We cannot thank you enough. Why did you come? Celine looked around, her expression steady. Because someone called for help. It did not matter that the call was accidental. We answer calls for help. That is what we do. The Kraloshi were silent for a moment, absorbing the simplicity and power of her words. Marek added, "We know what it is like to wait and hope. We cannot let others face danger alone if we can prevent it." The council members exchanged glances, the weight of understanding settling over them. Back in orbit, the Terran fleet began assisting with cleanup operations. Small drones repaired damage on Kurilosh stations and helped stabilize orbital debris. Supplies were delivered to the surface, including food, medical kits, and communication devices to restore disrupted networks. The Kuriloshi public watched with amazement. These humans did not leave after the battle. They stayed, ensuring that the planet would recover and that the people would be safe. A young child pointed to the sky. "Look, they are helping us." Her father smiled, tears in his eyes. "Yes, child. They are more than warriors. They are protectors." The retreating invader fleet became a topic of conversation across Kurilosh. The enemy had underestimated the humans, and now stories of the battle spread quickly. The invaders had expected to intimidate a weak planet, but instead found themselves outmatched not only in skill, but in adaptability and courage. Reports from distant systems began to arrive. Nearby civilizations had also noticed the battle. Word of humans, the Deathworlders, spread. They were not invincible, but they were fearless, unpredictable, and relentless in defending those who could not defend themselves. For Kurilosh, this was more than a lesson in strategy. It was a lesson in hope. They had been a planet often overlooked by the larger galactic powers. Now they understood that even the smallest cry for help could reach those willing to answer. Captain Celine returned to her ship as dusk fell over the planet. She walked along the observation deck, looking down at the cities still recovering but alive. The Kuriloshi people had endured fear, and now because of human intervention they had a chance to thrive. Lieutenant Marek joined her, leaning against the rail. "Captain, you think they understand what we've done?" Celine shook her head slightly. "They understand in time. They'll see that the humans who fight for others do not always need recognition. Sometimes they just act. The lesson is the action itself." Marek nodded thoughtfully. "I think they will remember it. For generations." Celine smiled faintly. "They will. And if they call again, we will answer. That is what being a Deathworlder means." In the following days, Kurilosh began rebuilding. Human engineers helped repair damaged buildings and stations, sharing knowledge of construction techniques, energy management, and emergency protocols. Kuriloshi scientists learned from human tactics, combining them with their own understanding of defense and planetary management. The bond between the two species grew stronger. Where once there had been fear and uncertainty, now there was trust. The Kuriloshi began to consider humans as allies, not distant, unknown warriors. A festival was planned to celebrate survival and unity, a small gesture of thanks to the humans who had changed their lives. Children painted images of starships in the sky, soldiers shared stories of bravery, and elders spoke in awe of the tactics and courage they had witnessed. Meanwhile, the human fleet prepared to depart. Captain Celine stood on the bridge looking at the planet below. "All stations secure?" she asked. "Affirmative," reported Marek. "Kurilosh is stable. They are capable of handling the aftermath." "Good," she said softly. "Let's move on. There are others out there who may need help, and we cannot stay in one place too long." Before leaving, Celine addressed Kurilosh once more via communication. "Remember this. We answer calls for help whenever we can. Protect your people, rebuild wisely, and stay vigilant. The galaxy can be dangerous, but you are not alone." Governor Lyra's voice trembled slightly. "We will never forget. Your courage has given us hope and safety." "Thank you, Captain Celine." Celine nodded. "That is all any of us ask." As the Terran fleet jumped into faster-than-light travel, Kurilosh watched silently. The planet had survived a terrifying attack and had witnessed the extraordinary power of humanity. The legends of Deathworlders had become real in their eyes, not through myths but through action, courage, and the willingness to protect those who could not protect themselves. Even the children knew that their galaxy had changed. The humans were no longer distant beings in the stars. They were guardians, a presence that demanded respect and inspired hope. For the enemy invaders, the lesson was clear. They had underestimated a species from a harsh world, a species that thrived in chaos, adapted to every challenge, and fought not for conquest but for others. The Deathworlders would not be ignored again, and for Kurilosh, the accidental SOS had become a turning point. The galaxy had shown them something unexpected, that in the face of fear and danger, courage and intelligence combined with care for others could turn the tide. The stars above Kurilosh seemed brighter now, as though reflecting the promise of humanity's presence. And in the hearts of the people, hope had taken root. The Deathworlders had arrived, and the galaxy would never be the same again.